I always believed in the idea of a perfect life. For years, Samantha and I had built one together. At 32, I was a successful entrepreneur in Los Angeles, running a tech company that was growing fast. Samantha, my wife, was the director of marketing for a major tech firm herself. We were both driven, focused, and shared a vision for the future. From the outside, our life seemed flawless. Our friends admired our relationship, and even strangers would comment on how perfect we looked as a couple. We had the kind of life that people aspired to: good jobs, a beautiful home, and enough money to travel the world. But like anything that seems too perfect, there were cracks forming beneath the surface, cracks that I was too blind to see at first. Samantha and I had been married for 5 years, and in that time we had built a routine that had made our bond seem unbreakable. Every morning we would have breakfast together before starting our day, sharing small moments of laughter. I would leave for work and she would do the same. We would text throughout the day, share stories, and catch up when we got home. It was a rhythm I had grown to depend on, and I thought it was a rhythm that kept us strong. But then things began to change. Samantha started coming home later and later, claiming that she was swamped with work or attending business events. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was ambitious just like me. We both knew the pressure of climbing the corporate ladder, and I didn't mind her working late if it meant advancing her career. But the late nights began to pile up, and the excuses started to sound less convincing. She was no longer the same person she had been when we first met. It wasn't until one night when I was sitting in our living room, staring at the empty chair across from me, that I realized something was wrong. I had waited for her to come home as I always did. The clock ticked on, and as the minutes turned to hours, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. Samantha had been gone for hours and she hadn't called to check in. When she finally came home that night, there was an unfamiliar tension in the air. I could tell something had changed in her, something subtle but noticeable. She kissed me on the cheek as she always did, but this time it felt distant. I brushed it off, attributing it to the stress of her work. She made up another excuse about a business dinner and went to bed early, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Over the next few weeks, her absences became more frequent. She would disappear for entire nights, returning the next day with some new reason why she had been gone. Sometimes she claimed to be working late on an important project. Other times, it was a last-minute social event. But no matter what excuse she gave, something felt off. I couldn't pinpoint it, but I could feel the distance between us growing. It wasn't long before I started to notice the small signs, the little inconsistencies in her story, the way she would avoid eye contact when I asked her about her day, the way she would quickly hide her phone when I walked into the room. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, Samantha had always been supportive of my career and ambitions. She had always been my rock, the one person who would never let me down. But something was changing. One evening I decided to follow her. I didn't want to, but the curiosity gnawed at me, making me feel like I was losing control of something I once held so dear. I drove behind her as she left the house, keeping my distance so she wouldn't notice. The streets of Los Angeles at night were quiet, and as I followed her down a series of winding roads, she pulled into a part of town I didn't recognize, a part of town where we'd never been before. She stopped in front of a small, run-down hotel just outside the city. My heart raced in my chest as I watched her get out of the car, straightening her coat before heading inside. I sat there for a long time, the silence in my car deafening. I didn't know what to think. Was she just meeting a client? Was this another business trip? Or was there something more to it? I had to know. The following morning, I made a decision. I hired a private investigator. I didn't want to, but I needed answers. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing Samantha to something or someone that I couldn't see. The investigator's job was simple: follow Samantha and find out where she was going and who she was meeting. The days that followed were the hardest. I kept busy with work, pushing myself harder than ever to drown out the anxiety creeping in at the back of my mind. Every time my phone rang or a text message came in, I braced myself for the worst. I had no idea what I was about to uncover, but I knew it would change everything. The investigator finally got back to me. He confirmed that Samantha had been seeing a man named David. He was a consultant at her company, someone I had never met, but someone who had been spending a lot of time with her. Much more time than anyone should with a married woman. The feeling in my gut had been right. I was crushed. But I wasn't going to act on impulse. I needed to know more, to gather all the evidence before I confronted her. For 2 weeks, I let the investigator dig deeper, gathering every piece of information he could find. And with every new revelation, the truth became undeniable. Samantha wasn't just spending time with David for work. She was in a full-blown affair. I spent those 2 weeks in a state of disbelief, anger, and sadness. I couldn't escape the feeling that everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in, had been shattered. But I had to face the truth. I had to confront Samantha. I wasn't sure how I would do it, but one thing was clear. I couldn't go on living a lie. The 2 weeks I spent waiting felt like an eternity. Every minute dragged by, each one heavier than the last. I couldn't escape the thoughts that consumed me. How long had this been going on? Had she ever loved me? Was this all just a lie? The office became my escape, a place where I could bury myself in work and forget, if only for a moment, the storm brewing at home. But no matter how busy I was, every conversation, every meeting, brought me back to the same place. The hotel, the investigator's report, and the name David. My thoughts would always return to her, Samantha, who had once been the woman I trusted more than anyone else in the world. Now she was a stranger. I would be lying if I said I wasn't angry. Anger was something I struggled to control. It wasn't just because of the affair. It was everything, the deceit, the lies, the empty promises. I had spent so many years building a life that I believed was strong, only to realize it had been constructed on fragile ground. One evening, after another long day at the office, I found myself standing outside our house, staring at the front door. I could hear the faint sound of her laughter from inside. It should have been a sound that made me smile, the same laugh I had fallen in love with, but instead, it felt like a cruel reminder of the person she had become. I had to know the truth. I couldn't let her continue to live in this false version of our life. I walked inside, my heart pounding in my chest. Samantha was sitting on the couch, her laptop open in front of her as she scrolled through emails. When she saw me, she smiled, genuinely, I thought. But that smile didn't reach her eyes the way it used to. It was like there was something hidden behind it, something she wasn't telling me. "Hey babe, you're home early," she said, closing her laptop. I gave a small nod, trying to keep my composure. "Yeah, decided to leave the office a little earlier tonight." She didn't seem to think much of it. I could tell she was relieved, as if she was hoping I hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. But I had. And it wasn't just tonight. It was everything. "I was thinking we could go out tonight," she said almost casually. "Maybe grab dinner, just the two of us. It's been a while since we had a night like that." I swallowed hard. I wanted to scream, to demand answers right then and there, but I held back. This wasn't the moment to lose control. Not yet. "I'm not hungry," I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Actually, I've been thinking about something, Sam. I think we need to talk." Her expression changed, the smile fading into uncertainty. She looked at me, her brows furrowed, sensing the shift in my tone. But she didn't speak. She just waited. And I knew deep down that she already knew what was coming. "I hired a private investigator," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "I know everything. About you and David. About the hotel. About the affair." The silence that followed was deafening. She didn't flinch, didn't try to deny it. Her eyes dropped to the floor as if she couldn't bear to meet my gaze. I took a step closer, my heart racing as the words came out in a flood. "How long, Samantha? How long have you been seeing him? How long have you been lying to me?" Her lips trembled, but she remained silent for a moment, her eyes filled with guilt. "John, Don't," I interrupted, my voice tight. "Don't try to explain. I've seen the proof. You can't talk your way out of this one." She closed her eyes, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of everything had finally hit her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, almost to herself. "I never wanted to hurt you." I took a deep breath, holding back the anger that was threatening to consume me. "No, Samantha. You don't get to apologize now. Not after everything." The hurt and betrayal I felt were indescribable. I had trusted her with everything, my love, my life, my future, and she had shattered it all in a matter of months. And for what? For a man I didn't even know? "I never wanted it to get to this point," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it happened. I've been miserable too. I didn't know how to fix it." I shook my head, feeling a cold numbness take over. "Fix it? You're talking about fixing it now? After everything?" I turned away from her, walking toward the window. The night outside was dark, silent, but I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. The house, once filled with warmth and comfort, now felt cold and foreign. I didn't recognize it anymore. I didn't recognize her. "John, please. Don't do this," Samantha pleaded, her voice breaking. "We can work through this. I'll end it with him. We can go to therapy. We can." I cut her off with a harsh laugh. "Work through this? It's too late for that, Sam. You've already made your choice. And so have I." I turned to face her one last time. The woman I had once loved, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, was standing before me, her eyes filled with regret. But it was too late for regret. "I'm done," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm done pretending everything's fine. I want a divorce." She stood there, stunned, as if she couldn't believe what I had just said. But deep down, I knew this was the only way forward. I couldn't stay with someone who had betrayed me so completely. And as much as it hurt, I knew I had to walk away. The days after the confrontation with Samantha were a blur. The numbness I felt was overwhelming, as if everything had been stripped away in one brutal moment. I moved out of the house a few days later. It didn't feel real. It felt like a nightmare that I was unable to wake from, a surreal twist in the life I had worked so hard to build. I rented a small apartment in the city, far from the home Samantha and I had shared. Every corner of that house had memories attached to it, memories that now felt foreign, tainted by the lies and betrayal. I couldn't bear to stay there any longer. Samantha had tried to reach out to me multiple times, but I ignored her calls. There was nothing left to say. The truth was out and we couldn't go back to the way things were. I didn't owe her anything anymore. Her apologies and promises to change meant nothing to me now. In the weeks that followed, the story of our divorce began to spread. Word of Samantha's affair with David, a man she had worked closely with, spread through both of our circles like wildfire. I didn't have to say much. People knew. It was the kind of scandal that would get attention, and it did. At work, I was met with sympathy from some and cold indifference from others. I had always been the guy who kept his personal life private, but now my dirty laundry was on display for the whole world to see. The whispers followed me wherever I went. People looked at me differently. They didn't know the full story, but they didn't need to. The betrayal was enough. Samantha, on the other hand, didn't handle it as gracefully. She was a strong, successful woman in her own right, but the public humiliation hit her hard. Her professional reputation took a huge blow. At her company, people began to question her judgment, especially since David worked in the same firm. There were rumors that she had been using her position to gain favors, that she had been so consumed by her ambitions that she lost sight of what truly mattered. And while the affair was her choice, it was my name that became tainted by it. I kept my distance from her. I didn't want to be involved in the drama of our broken marriage any longer. But one evening, after a long day at work, I found myself at a bar with a few colleagues. I was nursing a whiskey when I felt someone sit down next to me. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Samantha. Her presence was like a shadow I couldn't escape. She looked different, more fragile, more vulnerable. Gone was the confident, ambitious woman I had married. In her place was someone who had been brought to her knees, broken by the weight of her own actions. "John," she said softly, her voice shaky. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything at first. I didn't know what there was to say. We had already said everything there was to say. "I'm sorry," she continued, her voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know how much I regret everything. I made a terrible mistake." I took a long sip of my drink before responding. "Regret? That's easy to say now, Samantha. After everything that's happened, after what you've done, your regret doesn't mean anything to me." She looked down at her hands, visibly fighting back tears. "I never wanted to hurt you. I don't even know how it all happened. I was so caught up in work, in this constant race to prove myself, that I lost sight of what really mattered. I lost you. It's too late for that," I said, my voice steady. "You made your choice. And now we both have to live with the consequences of it." There was a long silence between us, the weight of our past hanging heavily in the air. I could feel the old anger bubbling up again, but I held it back. I wasn't going to let her drag me back into her web of lies and regret. "You were everything to me, Samantha," I continued, my voice softer now. "But you chose to betray that trust. You broke us. And that's something I can't just forget." She nodded, her face pale, her eyes wet with unshed tears. I know I can't fix it. But I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry." "I don't need your apology," I said. "What I need is to move on." And with that I stood up, leaving her there at the bar. I had heard enough. Samantha had taken everything from me, and now she was trying to take my peace of mind too. But I wasn't going to let her. I walked out into the cool night air, the weight of my decision settling on my shoulders. There was no going back. My life had been altered in ways I couldn't even begin to understand, but one thing was clear: I was done. No more lies. No more pretending. I was going to rebuild. The days following that conversation at the bar were a blur. I spent most of my time in the office, immersing myself in work to avoid thinking about the wreckage of my personal life. I had a lot to rebuild and I didn't have time for distractions. The divorce was looming, the papers were in motion, and I was trying to keep my focus. But every now and then, the weight of everything would hit me, usually in the quiet moments when I was alone. My apartment, which had once felt like a temporary refuge, was beginning to feel like my new reality. It was small, impersonal, and empty. The silence was deafening, and no matter how much I tried to convince myself that I was fine, the truth was that I was struggling. I had thought that once I confronted Samantha, once I made the decision to move forward, everything would get easier. But it didn't. Every aspect of my life felt like it was still in the middle of a storm, spinning out of control. My friends had been supportive, but even they could only offer so much comfort. They couldn't understand the depth of what I had lost. Then there was the matter of work. I had always been the type to throw myself into my business, believing that success would fill the voids left by personal failure. But now I found myself questioning everything. Would my career still mean as much to me if I didn't have someone to share it with? Was this all worth it? The weeks dragged on, and Samantha's presence in the media began to fade. Her reputation, once shining with potential, was now tarnished. The company she worked for distanced itself from her, and rumors about her career began to spread. Some said she had been forced into early retirement, while others speculated that her future at the company was uncertain. But as much as I felt for her, the pain of the betrayal was too much. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. There was no going back, no repairing what had been broken. Samantha had made her choices and now she had to live with them. And so did I. One evening, I found myself sitting in a small cafe near my apartment, nursing a cup of coffee. It had become my routine, a solitary escape from the chaos of life. As I sat there trying to collect my thoughts, I noticed a familiar face across the room. It was David. The man who had torn my life apart, sitting casually with a group of friends, laughing as if nothing had happened. My first instinct was to storm over to him, to confront him, to yell at him, to make him feel what I was feeling. But I didn't move. I just stared at him, anger and betrayal boiling inside me. He looked so ordinary, so unaffected. I stood up slowly, my heart racing. But as I took a step toward him, I stopped myself. I realized that confronting him, screaming at him, wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't fix the past. It wouldn't bring back what I had lost. Samantha had chosen him over me, but that choice had nothing to do with me anymore. It was her mistake to live with, not mine. With a deep breath, I turned around and walked out of the cafe, leaving the past behind me. I had to remind myself that I was no longer tied to that world, the world where I was defined by Samantha and everything that had gone wrong. I was free to start over, free to build a new life, free to focus on what really mattered, myself. The following weeks were a blur of new beginnings. I threw myself into my work and for the first time in a long while, I started to feel a sense of purpose again. My business began to flourish, and I was making decisions for myself, not based on anyone else's expectations. It felt good, empowering even. The stress of the divorce had subsided, and with it I began to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. I started to take better care of myself, eating healthier, working out more regularly, and spending time doing the things I had once loved but had neglected for years. I reconnected with old friends, went on weekend trips, and even started to consider the possibility of dating again, though I wasn't sure if I was ready for that just yet. It wasn't about filling the void left by Samantha. It was about rediscovering my own happiness, my own identity, something I had lost in the years I had spent trying to make her happy. But even as I moved forward, I couldn't entirely let go of the anger. It still simmered beneath the surface, an unresolved knot in my chest. I wasn't ready to forgive Samantha, not yet. What she had done to me was unforgivable, and though I was rebuilding my life, a part of me still wanted her to understand the hurt she had caused. One evening, months after the divorce, I received a letter from her. It was a simple note, handwritten on a piece of paper, and it sat in my mailbox for days before I finally opened it. John, I don't expect you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve it and I can't change what I did, but I want you to know that I regret everything. I was selfish and I ruined something beautiful. I will carry the weight of my actions for the rest of my life. I hope you find peace, John. I hope you find happiness. Samantha. I stared at the letter for a long time, my fingers tracing the edges of the paper. It was the first time I had heard from her in months, and while part of me wanted to feel relief, another part of me couldn't let go of the bitterness. I had spent so much time hating her, resenting her for what she had done to me, that the idea of forgiveness felt like an impossible task. But as I thought about it, I realized that forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. To truly move on, I needed to let go of the anger, the resentment, the bitterness that had been holding me captive for so long. It wouldn't be easy and it wouldn't happen overnight, but it was the final piece I needed to complete my journey toward healing. I folded the letter and placed it in my drawer, a small symbol of the chapter of my life that was now behind me. It was time to close the door on the past and step fully into the future. The days blurred together in a way that only time could manage. The first few months after the divorce were filled with moments of doubt, of uncertainty. But as time passed, the weight that had been hanging over me slowly started to lift. The anger, the hurt, they didn't disappear overnight, but they became less consuming. I found myself able to breathe again, to live without the constant ache of betrayal. Work, once the thing I used to bury myself in to avoid my personal life, became a source of purpose again. I had always prided myself on my business acumen, but now it felt different. I wasn't just working to prove something to myself or to anyone else. I was building something that was mine, something that didn't have to carry the stain of my failed marriage. I made the decision to expand the company, taking on new projects and bringing in a team that shared my vision. We were growing rapidly, and I could see my future more clearly than I had in years. It wasn't just about success anymore, it was about doing things for the right reasons, because I believed in them, because I had control over them. And yet, there were still moments when I thought about Samantha. I wondered how she was doing, if she had found peace, if her life had moved on in the way mine had begun to. I didn't want to care, but I did. I had loved her. That love hadn't simply disappeared. It was a part of me, and while the pain had dulled, it wasn't gone. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I decided to take a walk. The city was alive with the hum of traffic, people coming and going, lost in their own worlds. I wandered through the streets, past cafes and bars, not really heading anywhere, just trying to clear my mind. As I turned a corner, I bumped into someone. It was her. Samantha. She was standing in front of a bookstore, looking at a display of books in the window. She hadn't noticed me yet, and for a moment, I considered turning around and walking away. I didn't want to face her, not like this. But then, just as I was about to take that step, she turned around. "John," she said, her voice soft, a little surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here." We stood there for a moment, both unsure of what to say next. There was an awkwardness between us, a tension that neither of us knew how to break. But this time it felt different. She didn't look like the confident, powerful woman I had once known. She looked tired, worn down. I had always thought of her as someone who could handle anything, but now I saw someone who was still carrying the weight of everything she had done. "I didn't expect to see you either," I said, my voice neutral. "I've been meaning to reach out," she continued, taking a hesitant step forward. I wanted to see how you were. I know that doesn't change anything, but I just wanted to know that you're okay." I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. Okay. Better, actually. I've been working a lot. I've started new projects." She gave me a small, knowing smile. "I'm glad to hear that." "Really?" For a long moment, there was silence between us. Neither of us seemed to know how to navigate this encounter. What were we supposed to say? The woman I had loved, the woman who had destroyed everything I had built with her, was now standing in front of me, a stranger in a way. "I'm sorry, John," she said softly, almost as though it had been building up inside her for a long time. "I'm sorry for everything. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. All I can do is say I regret it." I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. I had thought about this moment many times, what I would say, how I would react. But now that it was happening, it didn't feel like what I had imagined. "I know you're sorry," I said, looking her in the eyes. "But it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change the fact that you hurt me. You hurt us. And I can't just forget that." Samantha nodded, her eyes downcast. "I know. I don't expect you to forgive me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I hope that someday you can move on from this. I hope you can find peace." The words lingered in the air, and I realized for the first time that I didn't need her to forgive me. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need to carry this pain anymore. It had taken me months to reach this point, but I finally understood that holding on to the past was only holding me back. "I've moved on," I said quietly. "Not because of you, not because of anything you did, but because I've realized that I deserve better. I deserve a life that's mine. And I'm starting to build that again." Samantha's expression softened. "I'm glad to hear that. I really am." We stood there for a moment longer, two people who had once been everything to each other, now standing as strangers. There was no grand reconciliation, no sweeping gesture to erase the years of pain. But it didn't matter. I didn't need that closure anymore. I had already moved on. I had already taken back control of my life. "Goodbye, Samantha," I said, finally turning to leave. I hope you find peace too. I walked away, the sounds of the city fading into the background as I took my first real step toward a new chapter. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened, but about accepting it. It wasn't about her or the past, it was about me and the future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally free.